Have you ever gotten to the end of a crazy, frantic workday? You sit back and you just wonder, what did I actually do today? Yeah, you answered a ton of emails, you jumped between a dozen different tasks, you sat through meetings, but did you actually move the needle on anything that really matters? If that sounds familiar, trust me, you are not alone. Today, we are diving deep into the modern epidemic of feeling constantly busy, but never really productive. Does this look familiar? Yeah. If this image of just pure, chaotic energy gives you even a little bit of anxiety, it's probably because it feels so real. This is the state so many of us are trapped in. Overwhelmed, overstimulated, and just spread way too thin. But let's be clear. This isn't productivity. This is just noise. Okay, so let's get into it. You know, they say you can't solve a problem until you can actually name it. So for this first part, we're going to act like doctors. We're going to give a proper diagnosis to this widespread condition of, well, fake work. The first term you absolutely need to know is faux productivity. I mean, it's a great word, right? It's exactly what it sounds like. Fake productivity. It is the art of looking busy. And get this, a report from Asana found that a staggering 60% of our time at work is spent on work about work. Think about that for a second. That means for every 5 days you work, 3 of them are spent just giving status updates, checking emails, and managing the work, instead of actually doing the work. It's crazy. And then you've got its very close cousin, pseudo productivity. Now, this one is less about the tasks themselves and more about the performance of it all. It's using all this visible activity as a substitute for actual productive effort. You know the type, right? The colleague who makes a big show of coming in early, leaving late, and always typing furiously and looking completely stressed out. Our culture often mistakes this performance of work for actual achievement. So here's where it gets really fascinating. Some argue that this isn't just a collection of bad habits, it's actually a structural feature of our modern economy. The late anthropologist David Graeber went so far as to say that a huge percentage of our jobs are, to put it bluntly, bullshit jobs, roles that are fundamentally completely pointless. Graeber actually identified 5 main types, and just see if any of these sound a little familiar. First, you have flunkies. Their whole job is just to make someone else look or feel important. Think of a doorman whose only job is to signal how fancy a building is. Then you have goons, who basically exist to harm or deceive others, like telemarketers or corporate lobbyists. Duct tapers are the people hired to constantly patch up problems that really should be fixed permanently. Box tickers let an organization pretend it's doing something it isn't, like filling out endless forms no one ever reads. And finally, you have taskmasters, who pretty much just create and assign work to other people. So the big question is, why? If so much of this work is meaningless, why on earth do we all do it? Why do we participate in this illusion? Well, in this next section, we're going to dig into the really deep psychological and cultural reasons we've all fallen into this busyness trap. This slide just lays it all out so perfectly. On the left, you've got the noble stories we tell ourselves, right? We're busy because we're driving key results or being dedicated employees. But then look at the right column. The research points to something else entirely. The truth is, we're busy because being busy has become a status symbol. We have a deep, deep fear of being idle. One study found that people would literally rather give themselves electric shocks than sit quietly alone with their thoughts. And on top of that, our brains get a tiny little dopamine hit for every simple task we complete, which creates an addiction to checking things off a list, no matter how trivial they are. And this quote from sociologist Jonathan Gershuni just absolutely nails it. For most of human history, you know what the ultimate status symbol was? Leisure time. It meant you were so successful you didn't have to work. We have flipped that completely on its head. Today, telling someone you're slammed or buried in work is actually a weird way of signaling your own importance. Okay, so it's a status symbol. Big deal, right? Who cares? Well, it is a big deal. Because this culture of fake work has a very real and very, very high cost. And not just for a company's bottom line, but for our own health and our own sanity. Let's actually quantify some of this damage. Let's start with something we all think we're good at, multitasking. Well, here's the hard truth. Our brains can't actually do it. What we're really doing is just rapidly switching from one task to another. And get this. According to the American Psychological Association, that constant switching can destroy our actual productivity by as much as 40%. And here's why that loss is so massive. Research from the University of California found that after just a single interruption, we're talking one Slack notification, one quick email check, it takes our brains an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds to get back to that same level of deep focus. Now just multiply that by how many times you get interrupted every single day. And when you add up all those little interruptions, it creates a truly massive problem. One study estimated that the cost of all this context switching in lost productivity is around $450 billion to the global economy annually. To put that in perspective, that's more than the entire GDP of a country like Austria. But those economic numbers, as shocking as they are, they don't even begin to tell the whole story. The far more important cost is the personal one. It's what this culture of constant, frantic busyness is doing to us as human beings. Being perpetually busy puts your body into a state of chronic stress, that classic fight or flight mode. But when that becomes your permanent state, it can lead to some really severe health problems, like heart disease and high blood pressure. And that's before we even get to the mental toll, the burnout, the anxiety, and that deep dissatisfaction that comes from working so hard but feeling like you have nothing to show for. All right, that was the diagnosis, the causes, and the damage. And it's a pretty bleak picture, I know. But here is the good news, and it is genuinely good news. There is a cure. We can escape the busyness trap. And it doesn't require some radical, life-altering change. It really just starts with a simple shift in how we see things. The solution isn't a new app or some complicated productivity system. It's much more fundamental than that. It all begins with simply understanding and categorizing the different ways we spend our time at work. Writer Saho Bloom gives us this incredibly useful framework. He says that pretty much all professional work falls into one of four categories. You've got management time. That's all the reactive stuff, the emails, the meetings, where most of us are just drowning. Then there's creation time. This is the deep, focused work that actually produces real value. And finally, you have the two that are so often forgotten: consumption time, learning new things, and ideation time, which is just thinking. The core problem for most of us is that management time has eaten everything else. So here's a practical, 4-step plan you can use to reclaim your schedule. Step 1, audit. For just 1 week, color code your calendar using those 4 time types. Be brutally honest with yourself about where your time is really going. Step 2, batch. Contain all that management time. Group your calls and emails into a few dedicated blocks. Step 3, protect. Schedule 90-minute, uninterrupted blocks for creation and treat them like they are your most important meetings. And step 4, schedule growth. You have to intentionally put time for consumption and ideation on your calendar, even if it's just for 30 minutes. But of course, let's be real, individual action can only go so far. The whole organization, the whole culture has to change. So there are key things companies can do. They need to start rewarding actual output, not just visible activity. They need to be absolutely ruthless about killing pointless meetings. They need to model what real-time off looks like. And they have to build some slack into the system so that everyone isn't running at 110% all the time. We'll leave you with this final thought. Our culture is completely obsessed with doing more. But as the famous basketball coach John Wooden once said, never mistake activity for achievement. So what if the key to unlocking real productivity isn't adding more to your to-do list? What if the most productive thing you could possibly do was to do less?